I called a family dinner to discuss my will. My DIL was smiling too much. Suddenly, my grandson hugged me and whispered, "Grandma, Mommy put the diamond necklace in your purse to call the police." I froze. I secretly moved it to her bag. 10 minutes later, I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I should have known something was wrong the moment Brixton smiled at me. Not her usual tight-lipped, polite expression she reserved for family gatherings, but a genuine, almost excited smile that made my stomach twist with unease. In 8 years of marriage to my son Colin, I'd never seen her look at me like that, as if she was genuinely happy to see me. The dining room felt different that evening, too. The mahogany table I'd inherited from my mother gleamed under the crystal chandelier, set for 4 with my best china, the kind I only used for special occasions. Fresh white roses from my garden sat in the center, their sweet fragrance mixing with the scent of the roast beef I'd spent all afternoon preparing. Everything looked perfect, almost too perfect, like a stage set waiting for a performance. "Norma, you look absolutely radiant tonight," Brixton gushed as she kissed my cheek, her perfume heavy and cloying. She was wearing a new dress, something expensive in deep burgundy that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Her blonde hair was styled in loose waves, and her makeup was flawless, as if she'd just stepped out of a magazine. Colin followed behind her, looking tired from his architecture firm's latest project. At 36, he still had his father's gentle brown eyes, and that way of running his hand through his hair when he was stressed. He gave me a quick hug, distracted as usual these days. "Thanks for dinner, Mom. You know how much I appreciate you doing this." But it was Tommy who caught my attention. My 12-year-old grandson hung back by the doorway, his dark eyes darting between his parents and me with an expression far too serious for someone his age. He clutched his sketchpad against his chest, the one he carried everywhere, always drawing, always watching. Something about his posture made my grandmother instincts prickle. "Tommy, sweetheart, come give Grandma a hug," I called, opening my arms. He approached slowly, and when he wrapped his thin arms around me, I felt him trembling slightly. "Hi, Grandma," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Are you feeling all right, honey?" I asked, pulling back to study his pale face. "He's just tired," Brixton answered quickly, her hand landing possessively on Tommy's shoulder. "He had soccer practice after school, didn't you, baby?" Tommy nodded, but his eyes met mine for just a second, and I saw something there that made my breath catch. Fear. My grandson was afraid, and I had no idea why. "Well, let's sit down before everything gets cold," I said, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 7 times, its familiar sound usually comforting but somehow ominous tonight. Colin pulled out Brixton's chair with exaggerated chivalry, something he'd started doing more often lately, as if he was trying too hard to prove he was a good husband. She settled herself gracefully, that strange smile never leaving her face as she surveyed the table. "This all looks absolutely wonderful, Norma," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "You've really outdone yourself, and I just love what you've done with your hair. That silver color is so distinguished." I touched my hair self-consciously. I'd stopped dyeing it brown 6 months ago, finally embracing the silver that came with being 63. Brixton had made several cutting remarks about it before, calling it giving up, and suggesting I maintain myself better. Tonight's compliment felt as genuine as a politician's campaign promise. "Thank you," I replied carefully, taking my seat at the head of the table. Tommy sat to my right, still clutching his sketchpad, while Colin and Brixton faced us from across the polished wood surface. As I began carving the roast, Brixton launched into animated chatter about her day shopping at the high-end boutiques downtown. She'd bought new curtains for their living room, spent $300 on a throw pillow she claimed was absolutely essential, and gotten her nails done at that expensive salon she frequented. The casual way she mentioned spending money that would cover my groceries for a month made me grip the carving knife a little tighter. And then I stopped by that little jewelry shop on 5th Street, she continued, her eyes gleaming. They had the most exquisite diamond necklace in the window. $15,000, but completely worth it. The craftsmanship was just incredible. My hand stilled on the carving knife. $15,000. That was more than half of what I lived on in a year from my teaching pension. That's quite expensive, I managed to say. Oh, but Norma, you of all people should understand quality jewelry, Brixton said, her gaze dropping to the simple pearl earrings I wore. After all, you have that gorgeous diamond necklace your mother left you. The one worth about the same amount. You should wear it more often. Something cold settled in my stomach. I rarely talked about my mother's necklace, kept it locked in my jewelry box upstairs. How did Brixton know its value? I'd never had it appraised in front of her, never even worn it when she was around. The piece was too precious, too tied to memories of my mother's gentle hands fastening it around my neck when I was young. How do you know what it's worth? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Brixton's smile flickered for just a moment. Oh, Colin mentioned it once. Didn't you, honey? Colin looked up from his plate, confusion crossing his features. I don't remember talking about Mom's jewelry. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I could hear the tick of the grandfather clock, the soft clink of Tommy's fork against his plate as he pushed food around without eating. Something was definitely wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Speaking of jewelry, Brixton said brightly, as if the awkward moment hadn't happened. Norma, I noticed you're not carrying your usual purse tonight. That lovely black leather one you always use. I glanced toward the living room where I'd left my everyday purse, a practical brown bag that had seen better days. I thought I'd use the nicer one tonight, I said. The black one you mentioned is upstairs. Oh, you should definitely use the black one, Brixton insisted. It goes so much better with your outfit. Plus, didn't you say it has better compartments? More organized? The suggestion felt oddly insistent, and I found myself wondering why she cared which purse I carried. It's fine. This one works perfectly well. But Norma, she pressed, wouldn't you be more comfortable with your usual bag? The one with all your important things organized just how you like them? Tommy's fork clattered against his plate, making us all look at him. His face had gone even paler, and his hands were shaking slightly. Can I be excused? He asked quietly. But you've barely eaten, Colin protested. I'm not really hungry. Nonsense, Brixton said, her voice sharp for the first time that evening. You need to finish your dinner. We're family, and families eat together. The way she said family made something twist in my chest. There was possessiveness in it, ownership, as if she was marking her territory. Tommy sank back into his chair, but I noticed he kept glancing at me with those worried eyes. Actually, I said, standing up, I think I will go get my other purse. Brixton's right, it is better organized. Oh, wonderful, Brixton beamed. I'll come help you find it. That's not necessary, I said quickly, but she was already rising from her chair. I insist. Besides, I'd love to see your bedroom again. You've redecorated since last time, haven't you? I hadn't redecorated in 3 years, not since my husband died and left me rattling around in this big house alone. But I didn't correct her. Instead, I headed for the stairs, acutely aware of Brixton following close behind me, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. My bedroom felt smaller with her in it, her presence somehow filling all the available space. She wandered around, touching things, picking up the framed photo of my late husband and me on our 25th wedding anniversary. Such a lovely picture, she murmured. You two were so happy together. It must be lonely now, rattling around in this big house all by yourself. I found my black purse in the closet and turned to face her. I managed just fine. Oh, I'm sure you do. You're such a strong woman, Norma. So independent. Though at your age, it might be nice to have family closer. Have you ever thought about downsizing? Moving somewhere smaller, more manageable? The suggestion hit like a slap. Move out of the house my husband and I had shared for 30 years? The house where Colin had taken his first steps? Where we'd celebrated every Christmas and birthday? This is my home, Brixton. Of course it is, she said quickly, but I caught something calculating in her expression. I just meant that maintaining such a large property must be exhausting and expensive, and I clutched the purse handle tighter. I'm not ready to leave my home. No, of course not. I was just thinking out loud. She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. Should we head back downstairs? The boys will wonder what happened to us. As we walked back to the dining room, I felt like I was missing something important, some crucial piece of a puzzle I didn't even know I was supposed to be solving. Tommy was still sitting exactly where we'd left him, but now he was drawing frantically in his sketch pad, his pencil moving in quick, nervous strokes. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" I asked as I sat back down. He looked up, his eyes wide and serious. "Just stuff," he mumbled, closing the pad quickly. "Tommy's quite the artist," Brixton said, reaching across the table to ruffle his hair. He flinched away from her touch. "Always scribbling away in that little book. Sometimes I wonder what goes on in that head of his." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and growing unease. Brixton kept steering the conversation back to my house, my finances, my plans for the future. She asked about my will, about whether I'd updated it recently, about what I planned to do with my mother's jewelry. Each question felt like a probe, searching for something I couldn't identify. Colin, oblivious as always, talked about his latest architectural project, a modern office building that was giving him headaches. He seemed genuinely unaware of the undercurrents swirling around our family dinner, lost in his own world of blueprints and building codes. As I served dessert, my mother's famous apple pie recipe, Tommy suddenly stood up from his chair. "Grandma, can I show you something in the kitchen?" "What is it, honey?" "Just something," he said urgently. "Please." I followed him into the kitchen, leaving Colin and Brixton at the table. Tommy immediately went to the window, pretending to look out at my rose garden while his parents' voices drifted in from the dining room. "Tommy, what's wrong?" I asked softly. "You've been acting strange all evening." He turned to face me, and I saw tears gathering in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it, glancing nervously toward the dining room. Then he did something that made my heart stop. He stepped close to me and whispered so quietly I almost missed it. "Grandma, Mommy put the diamond necklace in your purse to call the police." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at my grandson's frightened face, my mind struggling to process what he'd just said. "What?" "The diamond necklace," he whispered even more quietly. "Mommy took it from your jewelry box when you were downstairs. She put it in your black purse. She's going to say you stole it and call the police. I heard her talking on the phone." My legs suddenly felt weak, and I had to grip the kitchen counter to stay upright. My own daughter-in-law was trying to frame me. The necklace, my mother's precious necklace that I'd treasured for 30 years, was being used as a weapon against me. "Are you sure?" I whispered back. Tommy nodded, tears now flowing freely down his cheeks. "She said you were getting too old, and someone needed to make decisions for you. She said once you were arrested, Dad would have to take care of everything." The pieces of the evening suddenly fell into place with horrifying clarity. Brixton's strange behavior, her insistence on me using my black purse, her questions about my house and finances. She wasn't just trying to get me arrested. She was trying to make me look incompetent, senile, unfit to manage my own affairs. And if that happened, Colin would step in. Sweet, trusting Colin who believed everything his wife told him. He'd take over my finances, my decisions, my life. and Brixton would be pulling all the strings from behind the scenes. I looked down at my grandson's tear-stained face and felt something fierce and protective rise in my chest. This child had risked his mother's wrath to warn me, had been carrying this terrible secret all evening. How long had he been living with this fear? How many other schemes had he witnessed? "Thank you for telling me, Tommy," I whispered, pulling him into a gentle hug. "You were very brave." "What are we going to do, Grandma?" I held him for a moment longer, my mind racing. Then I pulled back and looked into his eyes with new determination. "We're going to turn the tables, sweetheart. Sometimes the best way to catch someone in a trap is to let them think it's working." My hands trembled as I reached into my black purse, feeling around until my fingers closed around something cold and hard. There it was, nestled between my wallet and reading glasses, my mother's diamond necklace. The weight of it in my palm felt heavier than usual, not because of the stones, but because of what it represented. Betrayal, calculated cruelty, a trap designed to destroy everything I'd worked for in my 63 years of life. Tommy watched me with those serious dark eyes as I carefully lifted the necklace from my purse. Even in the kitchen's soft light, the diamonds caught the gleam and threw tiny rainbows across the white cabinets. This piece had been in our family for 4 generations, passed from mother to daughter, each woman treasuring it as a symbol of love and continuity. Now it was being used as a weapon. "How did you find out?" I whispered to Tommy, keeping my voice low enough that Colin and Brixton wouldn't hear us from the dining room. "I was getting my art supplies from the hall closet," he whispered back, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "I heard Mommy on the phone in your bedroom. She was talking to someone about how this would solve everything, how you'd finally be out of the way." Out of the way. The words hit me like ice water. I wasn't just an obstacle to Brixton. I was something to be removed entirely. I thought about all the little comments over the years, the suggestions that I was getting forgetful, that I shouldn't be living alone in such a big house, that I needed help managing my affairs. She'd been building a case against me for years, gathering ammunition for this moment. "Did she see you listening?" I asked. "No, I was really quiet. But Grandma, she said other things too." Tommy's voice broke slightly. "She said once the police arrested you, she'd make sure you went somewhere where you couldn't cause any more trouble. She said Dad would sign the papers because he'd think it was best for you." My blood ran cold. She wasn't just planning to have me arrested. She was planning to have me committed, declared incompetent, locked away somewhere while she and Colin took over my house, my money, my life. And knowing my son's trusting nature, he'd probably believe it was all for my own good. I wrapped my arm around Tommy's thin shoulders, feeling the tremor that ran through his small frame. This child had been living with this knowledge, carrying this terrible secret. How many nights had he lain awake worrying about what would happen to his grandmother? How many times had he wanted to tell someone but been too afraid? "You've been so brave, sweetheart," I murmured. "But now we need to be smart, too." From the dining room, I could hear Brixton's laugh, bright and artificial. She was probably checking her phone, waiting for whatever signal would bring her plan into motion. The police wouldn't just show up randomly. Someone would have to call them. Someone would have to report a theft. I looked down at the necklace in my hand, then at my grandson's worried face. An idea began forming in my mind, risky, but potentially brilliant. If Brixton wanted to play games, I'd show her what happened when you underestimated a retired schoolteacher who'd dealt with manipulative teenagers for 30 years. "Tommy, I need you to go back to the table and act normal," I said quietly. "Can you do that for Grandma?" He nodded, though his eyes were still wide with fear. "What are you going to do?" Something your mommy won't expect." I gave him what I hoped was a reassuring smile. "Trust me, okay?" After Tommy returned to the dining room, I stood in my kitchen for a moment, gathering my courage. The familiar space felt different now, charged with new purpose. The blue ceramic tiles my husband had installed 20 years ago, the white cabinets I'd painted myself, the window overlooking the rose garden we'd planted together. All of it suddenly felt precious in a way it hadn't before. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I'd be damned if I'd let someone take it from me without a fight. I slipped the necklace into my cardigan pocket and walked back to join my family. Brixton looked up as I entered, her smile so bright it could have powered the chandelier. "There you are," she said. "We were just wondering what happened to you two." "Tommy was showing me his latest drawing," I replied smoothly, settling back into my chair. "He's getting quite talented." "Oh, he certainly is," Brixton agreed, but her eyes were on my purse, now sitting beside my chair. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, wondering if I'd discovered her little surprise yet. Colin was finishing his second piece of apple pie, completely oblivious to the tension crackling between the women at his table. "Mom, this pie is incredible as always. I swear you could have been a professional baker." "Your father always said the same thing," I replied, but my attention was focused on Brixton. She kept checking her phone, her fingers dancing nervously on the table's surface. Whatever she was waiting for, it was supposed to happen soon. "You know, Norma," Brixton said suddenly, "I was thinking about what we discussed upstairs. About the house, I mean. Have you given any more thought to maybe getting some help around here? Someone to assist with the daily tasks?" There it was again, the suggestion that I was incapable of taking care of myself. "I manage perfectly well, thank you." "Oh, I'm sure you do. But accidents happen, especially to people living alone. Just last week, my friend Margaret's mother fell in her bathroom and wasn't found for hours. She could have died. The implication was clear. I was a danger to myself, a woman too old and frail to live independently. It was exactly the kind of narrative that would make sense to police officers when they found stolen jewelry in my possession. Poor old lady, losing her memory, maybe taking things that don't belong to her. "I'm very careful," I said evenly. "Of course you are. But sometimes being careful isn't enough." Brixton's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it quickly. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Sometimes we need other people to look out for us. Tommy had gone completely still beside me, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. He knew something was about to happen, and the poor child was terrified. I reached over and patted his hand gently, trying to offer what comfort I could. "Speaking of looking out for people," Colin said, setting down his fork, "Brixton and I have been talking about having you over for dinner more often. Maybe even having you stay with us sometimes, especially during the winter months when the roads can be dangerous." My heart sank. They'd been discussing my future, making plans for my life without consulting me. How long had these conversations been going on? How many times had they sat in their sterile modern house, deciding what was best for the inconvenient old woman who stood between them and her inheritance? "That's very thoughtful," I managed to say, "but I'm quite content in my own home." "But Mom," Colin pressed, "you're all alone here. What if something happened? What if you fell or had a medical emergency? It would be hours before anyone found you." The concern in his voice was genuine, which made it worse. Brixton had been working on him for months, maybe years, planting seeds of worry about my safety and well-being. She'd probably started small, mentioning times when I seemed forgetful or confused, pointing out how isolated I was in this big house. My trusting son had absorbed every suggestion, never realizing he was being manipulated. "Colin, I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of living independently." "Are you?" Brixton asked softly. "Because lately, you've seemed a bit scattered. Remember last month when you called Colin 3 times about the same doctor's appointment? Or when you forgot you'd invited us for dinner and we showed up to find you hadn't prepared anything?" I stared at her, my mouth falling open. Both of those incidents had happened, but not the way she was describing them. I'd called Colin about the doctor's appointment because the office had changed the time twice, and I'd wanted to make sure he knew about the changes since he was supposed to drive me. The dinner incident had happened because Brixton had called to change the date, and I'd gotten confused about which Sunday she meant. But the way she told it, I sounded like someone losing her grip on reality. "That's not exactly what happened," I began. But Colin was already nodding, his face creased with worry. "She's right, Mom. I've been concerned too, but I didn't want to say anything." My heart broke a little. My own son, the boy I'd raised with such love and care, was sitting here discussing my mental competence based on his wife's lies. Brixton had been setting this up for months, creating a narrative of decline that would justify whatever action she decided to take. "I think maybe we should talk about getting you some help," Colin continued gently. "Someone to come in during the day, help with medications and appointments. Maybe someone who could stay overnight occasionally." "A companion," Brixton added helpfully. "Someone trustworthy who could keep an eye on things." I understood now. Once they convinced everyone I needed supervision, it would be a short step to claiming I needed full-time care. And if I resisted, if I insisted I was fine, they'd point to my stubbornness as further evidence of mental decline. It was a perfect trap, designed to make any resistance look like proof of incapacity. Brixton's phone buzzed again, and this time she answered it. "Hello? Oh yes, this is Brixton Whitfield." She listened for a moment. Then her face shifted into an expression of shocked concern. "What? Are you sure? How is that possible?" Colin leaned forward. "What's wrong?" "That was the jewelry store on 5th Street, Brixton said, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine distress. "Someone called in a tip about a stolen necklace. They're asking if I know anything about it because apparently the description matches something that was recently reported missing." My blood turned to ice, but I forced myself to remain calm. This was it, the moment she'd been building toward all evening. But I was ready for her. "What kind of necklace?" I asked innocently. "A diamond necklace, vintage setting, worth about $15,000. Brixton's eyes were fixed on my face, watching for any reaction. They said the police might want to ask some questions, just to rule out any connection to our family. "Well, that's strange," I said, reaching for my cardigan pocket. "Because I have my mother's necklace right here." I pulled the necklace out, letting it dangle from my fingers so the diamonds caught the light. Brixton's face went white, her carefully constructed plan crumbling before her eyes. "I thought I'd wear it tonight," I continued conversationally. "But then I decided it was too fancy for a family dinner. Funny that someone would report one just like it's stolen." The silence that followed was deafening. Colin looked confused, glancing between his wife's pale face and my calm expression. Tommy was staring at me with something like awe, finally understanding what his grandmother was capable of. But Brixton wasn't finished. I could see her mind racing, trying to salvage her plan. "Well, that's wonderful that yours is safe," she said slowly. "But the police will probably still want to talk to everyone in the area, just to be thorough." "Of course," I agreed pleasantly. "Though I hope they realize that false reports are a serious crime. Someone could get in real trouble for wasting police resources." Through the dining room window, I could see flashing lights approaching in the distance. Red and blue, unmistakable. Brixton's backup plan was already in motion, and there was no way to stop it now. But that was fine. I was ready for them. The doorbell rang at exactly 9:15, its chime cutting through the tense silence that had settled over my dining room. I glanced at the grandfather clock, noting the precision of it all. Brixton had orchestrated this down to the minute, probably giving the police a specific time to arrive so she could ensure I'd be sitting here with what she thought was stolen jewelry in my possession. "I'll get it," Colin said, starting to rise from his chair. "No," Brixton said quickly, her voice sharper than she'd probably intended. "I mean, let me. It might be about the stolen necklace they mentioned on the phone." She smoothed her burgundy dress and walked toward the front door, her heels clicking confidently against my hardwood floors. This was her moment of triumph, the culmination of months of planning. I could almost see her mentally rehearsing her performance. The shocked, concerned daughter-in-law discovering that her elderly mother-in-law had stolen valuable jewelry. Tommy's small hand found mine under the table, his fingers cold and trembling. I squeezed gently, trying to reassure him even as my own heart hammered against my ribs. Everything depended on the next few minutes. I heard the front door open, followed by the low murmur of official voices. 2 officers from the sound of it, probably a standard response to a reported theft. Brixton's voice carried clearly as she played her part to perfection. "Officers, thank you for coming so quickly. I'm the one who called about the stolen necklace. I'm just so worried about my mother-in-law. She's been acting strangely lately, and when I heard about the theft..." Her voice trailed off as she led them into my dining room. The first officer was a middle-aged man with graying hair and kind eyes, the type who'd probably dealt with countless family disputes over the years. His younger partner looked fresh out of the academy, eager and serious. "Good evening," the older officer said politely. "I'm Sergeant Williams, and this is Officer Chen. We're here about a report of stolen jewelry. A diamond necklace, specifically, worth approximately $15,000. "Of course," I said, standing slowly. "Though I'm not sure how I can help you. All my jewelry is accounted for." Brixton stepped forward, her face a mask of concerned reluctance. "Officers, I hate to say this, but I think there might be a misunderstanding. You see, my mother-in-law has been having some memory issues lately. Confusion, forgetfulness. We've been worried about her." Colin shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly torn between loyalty to his wife and his own uncertainty about the situation. "Mom's been living alone in this big house," he added reluctantly. "We've noticed some changes." "What kind of changes?" Sergeant Williams asked, pulling out a small notebook. "Well," Brixton said, her voice heavy with manufactured sadness, "she's been misplacing things, getting confused about appointments. Last week she called the same doctor's office 3 times about the same visit. And she's been talking about money troubles, which is strange because we know she's financially stable." I listened to her lies with growing amazement. She was painting a picture of a woman in cognitive decline, someone who might take things without fully understanding what she was doing. It was brilliant in its cruelty, and it would have worked perfectly if Tommy hadn't warned me. "Mrs. Whitfield," Sergeant Williams addressed me directly, "do you mind if we ask you a few questions?" "Not at all," I replied calmly. "Have you been to any jewelry stores recently? Specifically, the one on 5th Street? I shook my head. "I don't shop for jewelry much anymore. Most of what I own has sentimental value." Officer Chen was looking around the dining room, taking in the expensive furnishings, the crystal chandelier, the obvious signs of a comfortable life. "This is a lovely home," he commented. "Have you lived here long?" 30 years, I said. "My husband and I bought it when Colin was 6. "And you live here alone now?" "Yes, since my husband passed 3 years ago." Brixton cleared her throat delicately. "Officers, I hate to bring this up, but I think you should know that when we arrived tonight, I noticed my mother-in-law seemed agitated. She kept fussing with her purse, acting nervous. All eyes turned to my black leather purse, sitting innocently beside my chair. Brixton's expression was one of pained regret, as if she was being forced to betray a loved one for their own good. "Mrs. Whitfield," Sergeant Williams said gently, "would you mind if we took a look in your purse, just to rule out any connection to the reported theft?" "Of course not," I said, reaching for the bag. "Though I should mention I did change purses this evening. I usually carry a brown one, but my daughter-in-law suggested I use this one instead." I caught the flicker of surprise that crossed Brixton's face. She hadn't expected me to mention that detail. In her version of events, I was a confused old woman who might have absent-mindedly taken something. She wasn't prepared for me to sound so clear and specific about the evening's events. I opened the purse and began removing items one by one. My wallet, reading glasses, a small packet of tissues, my house keys, a shopping list I'd written that morning. The officers watched patiently as I laid each item on the table. "That's everything," I said, showing them the empty interior. Sergeant Williams frowned. "Ma'am, we had a report that you might have a diamond necklace with you tonight. Are you sure there's nothing else in the bag?" "Quite sure," I replied. "Though I do have a diamond necklace. It belonged to my mother." I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out the necklace, letting it catch the light from the chandelier. Both officers leaned forward to examine it, and I saw Brixton go completely white. "This has been in my family for 4 generations," I continued. "It's never left this house except to go to the jewelry store for cleaning." "May I ask when it was last appraised?" Officer Chen asked. "About 5 years ago, when I updated my insurance. It was valued at $15,000 then." The silence that followed was deafening. Brixton's carefully constructed story was falling apart, and I could see her mind racing, trying to salvage the situation. "But," she said desperately, "that doesn't mean she didn't take another one. The one that was reported stolen. Maybe she has it hidden somewhere else." Sergeant Williams studied Brixton with new interest. "Ma'am, exactly what makes you think Mrs. Whitfield has stolen jewelry?" "Well, Brixton faltered, realizing she'd revealed too much. "I mean, when I heard about the theft, and knowing about her confusion lately." You called this in based on suspicion alone?" the sergeant asked. "Not because you actually saw stolen property?" "I was concerned," Brixton said, her voice rising slightly. "Is it wrong to be worried about family?" Tommy had been sitting quietly throughout this exchange, but now he spoke up, his young voice clear and steady. "Officer, can I tell you something?" Both officers looked at him with surprise. Children weren't usually part of these kinds of investigations. "What is it, son?" Sergeant Williams asked kindly. Tommy looked directly at his mother, his face pale but determined. "I heard Mommy on the phone earlier. She was talking about putting Grandma's necklace in her purse and calling the police." The words dropped into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock that spread to every corner. Colin's face went white, the officers exchanged glances, and Brixton looked like she'd been slapped. "Tommy," she said, her voice dangerously low, "you must have misunderstood what you heard." "No, I didn't," Tommy said firmly. "You were in Grandma's bedroom. You said this would solve everything, that Grandma would finally be out of the way." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Officer Chen stepped closer to Brixton, his expression no longer friendly. "Ma'am, is there something you'd like to tell us about this situation?" "My son is confused," Brixton said quickly. "Children often misinterpret adult conversations. I was probably talking about something else entirely." "Then you won't mind if we search your belongings as well?" Sergeant Williams asked. For the first time all evening, Brixton's composure cracked. "That's completely unnecessary. I'm the one who called you. Why would I have stolen jewelry?" "Just being thorough," the sergeant replied mildly. "If you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem." I watched as Brixton's face cycled through a range of emotions. Panic, calculation, desperation. She was trapped, and she knew it. But even cornered, she was dangerous. "Fine," she said finally. "But this is ridiculous. I'm trying to help my family, and you're treating me like a criminal." She grabbed her designer handbag from where she'd left it on the side table and opened it with exaggerated frustration. The officers watched as she pulled out her wallet, her phone, her car keys, a small makeup compact. And then, nestled at the bottom of the bag, something that caught the light and threw tiny rainbows across the wall. A diamond necklace, identical to the one I held in my hands. The silence was absolute. Even the grandfather clock seemed to have stopped ticking. Officer Chen reached for his handcuffs. "Ma'am, I think we need to have a longer conversation." Brixton stared at the necklace as if it were a snake that had materialized in her bag. "I don't understand. That's not mine. Someone must have put it there. Who? Sergeant Williams asked. You've had the bag with you all evening. Brixton's eyes darted around the room, landing on me with pure hatred. She did it. Somehow she put it in my bag. She's trying to frame me. Colin finally found his voice. Brixton, what the hell is going on? But his wife was beyond rational explanation now. The mask she'd worn for 8 years had finally slipped, revealing the calculating predator underneath. You want to know what's going on? She snarled, her voice nothing like the sweet tone she'd used all evening. I'm tired of pretending to care about your pathetic mother. I'm tired of waiting for her to die so we can get what's rightfully ours. This house, her money, everything she's hoarding while we struggle to pay our mortgage. Colin recoiled as if she'd struck him. We're not struggling. I make good money. Good money? Brixton laughed bitterly. Your mother sits on $800,000 in real estate and $200,000 in savings while I have to budget for groceries. Do you know how humiliating that is? Do you know what it's like to pretend to love someone who's standing in the way of the life you deserve? The truth poured out of her like poison from a broken bottle. Years of resentment, greed, and manipulation, all laid bare in my dining room while my grandson watched his mother reveal herself as a monster. I've been planning this for months, she continued, past the point of caring about consequences. Setting up the narrative about her mental decline, making sure everyone would believe she was incompetent. One arrest for theft, and we could have had her declared unfit. I could have had power of attorney within 6 months. She looked at Tommy with something approaching disgust. But my own son had to ruin it. My own child chose his grandmother over his mother. Tommy was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face as he realized the full extent of his mother's betrayal. This wasn't just about stealing jewelry or framing his grandmother. This was about a woman who saw her own family as nothing more than obstacles to overcome. Colin stood slowly, his face a mask of devastation. Take her away, he said quietly to the officers. Just take her away. As Officer Chen read Brixton her rights, she turned to look at me one last time. The hatred in her eyes was pure and undiluted. You think you've won, she spat. But this isn't over. I'll find another way. I'll make you pay for this. And then she was gone, led away in handcuffs while neighbors gathered on their porches to watch the spectacle. The woman who'd tried to destroy my life was finally facing the consequences of her actions. But as I looked at my devastated son and traumatized grandson, I realized that some victories come at a terrible cost. The silence that followed Brixton's arrest was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has ripped through your life and left everything unrecognizable. Colin sat slumped in his chair, his head in his hands, while Tommy curled up next to me on the sofa where we'd moved after the officers finished taking their statements. Sergeant Williams had been gentle but thorough, asking questions that painted a picture none of us wanted to see. How long had Brixton seemed interested in my finances? Had she ever suggested I was becoming forgetful before tonight? Had there been other incidents that might have been misinterpreted as signs of mental decline? Each question revealed another layer of her manipulation, another carefully planted seed of doubt about my competency. The doctor's appointment confusion, the dinner mix-up, even comments about my silver hair looking unkempt at family gatherings. She'd been building a case against me for months, maybe longer. But it was Tommy who provided the most damaging evidence. Tell the officers about your sketchbook, sweetheart, I said gently, stroking his hair as he leaned against my shoulder. Tommy looked up at me with those serious dark eyes, still red-rimmed from crying. Do I have to? It might help them understand what's really been happening. He nodded slowly and climbed off the sofa, disappearing upstairs to his overnight bag. When he returned, he was carrying the sketchpad I'd seen him clutching all evening, along with a small digital recorder that made my heart stop. Tommy, Sergeant Williams said kindly, what do you have there? I've been keeping track, Tommy said quietly, settling back beside me. Mommy says and does things when Dad's not around, and I wanted to remember them exactly, so I started writing them down and drawing pictures. He opened the sketchbook, and I gasped. Page after page of detailed drawings showed Brixton in various poses and situations. Brixton going through my mail when she thought no one was watching. Brixton talking on the phone with angry expressions while looking at papers that looked like bills. Brixton searching through my jewelry box, drawn with the careful attention to detail that only a child who'd been watching and worrying could achieve. She's been coming over when you're not here, Grandma, Tommy said, his voice barely above a whisper. She has your spare key. She makes copies of your papers and takes pictures of them with her phone. Officer Chen leaned forward. How long has this been going on? Since last summer, maybe longer. She told me it was our secret, that grown-ups sometimes had to check on grandparents to make sure they were okay. But I shouldn't tell anyone because it would hurt your feelings. My throat tightened as I realized how Brixton had manipulated my innocent grandson, making him complicit in her surveillance while convincing him it was for my own good. The child had been carrying this burden for months, torn between loyalty to his mother and love for his grandmother. And the recorder? Sergeant Williams asked gently. Tommy's small fingers trembled as he held up the device. I started recording her phone calls when she thought I was playing video games. She talks to someone about money a lot, and about making Grandma seem, I can't remember the word. Incompetent? I suggested quietly. He nodded. She said once Grandma was declared incompetent, Dad would have to take care of everything, and she could finally get the money to pay off their debts. Colin's head snapped up at that. What debts? We don't have any debts. Tommy looked at his father with the patient expression children get when adults are being deliberately obtuse. Daddy, Mommy has lots of credit cards you don't know about. She showed me the statements once when she was mad. She said it was your fault for not making enough money. How much? Colin asked, his voice hollow. Tommy shrugged. She said it was more than your car costs. And she keeps buying more stuff because she says we deserve nice things. More than his car costs. Colin drove a 3-year-old sedan that he'd bought used for about $28,000. If Brixton had racked up more debt than that without his knowledge, no wonder she'd been so desperate to get her hands on my assets. Sergeant Williams was taking notes rapidly. Son, do you think you could play some of those recordings for us? Tommy nodded and fumbled with the device's tiny buttons. After a moment, Brixton's voice filled my living room, clear and unmistakable. The stupid old woman thinks she's so smart, living in that big house like some kind of queen while we're drowning in debt. But I've got it all figured out. Once she's arrested for theft, Colin will have to face reality. She's obviously losing her mind, and someone needs to take control before she hurts herself or someone else. A pause, then another voice, tinny through the speaker. Are you sure this will work? What if she doesn't have the necklace with her? Oh, she'll have it. I made sure of that. I planted it in her purse while she was downstairs playing the perfect hostess. The whole family will be there to witness her confusion when the police find it. Colin will finally see that his precious mother needs professional care. And then? And then we get power of attorney, sell that ridiculously oversized house, and use the money to dig ourselves out of this hole. She'll be in some nice facility where she can't cause any more problems, and we'll finally have the life we deserve. The recording ended, leaving us all staring at the small device in Tommy's hands. The casual cruelty in Brixton's voice was breathtaking. She wasn't just planning to steal my money. She was planning to destroy my life and convince my own son that it was for my own good. There are more, Tommy said quietly. Lots more. She talks to that same person almost every week. Officer Chen looked at his partner. We're going to need to take this as evidence. All of it. The sketchbook, the recorder, everything. Of course, I said. Tommy, you did the right thing by keeping track of all this. You probably saved my life. Colin finally spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" Tommy's lower lip trembled. "I tried, Daddy. Remember when I said Mommy was acting weird? And when I asked you if Grandma was really sick? But you always said I was imagining things, that Mommy was just worried about Grandma because she loves her." The devastation on Colin's face was heartbreaking. He'd dismissed his own son's concerns, choosing to believe his manipulative wife over the child who'd been desperately trying to warn him. How many times had Tommy tried to speak up, only to be told he was mistaken, or imagining things? "I'm sorry," Colin whispered. "I'm so sorry, Tommy. I should have listened to you." "There's something else," Tommy said, looking at me uncertainly. "Mommy has been putting stuff in your food sometimes, when you're not looking. Little white pills that she crushes up." And the blood drained from my face. "What kind of pills?" "I don't know. She keeps them in her purse. But after you eat the food with the crushed pills, you always seem really tired and confused. That's when she takes pictures of you and writes things down about how you're acting." Drugging me. Brixton had been systematically drugging me to create evidence of mental decline. No wonder I'd felt foggy and disoriented after some of our family dinners. No wonder I'd sometimes forgotten conversations or felt unusually tired. She'd been poisoning me, then documenting the effects as proof of my failing mental state. Sergeant Williams looked grim. "Mrs. Whitfield, have you noticed any patterns to when you felt confused or forgetful?" I thought back over the past few months, connecting dots I'd never seen before. Usually after family dinners, or when Brixton brought me food when I was recovering from that fall last spring. "You fell?" Officer Chen asked. "Down my front steps. I thought I'd just missed my footing, but..." I stopped, a horrible suspicion forming. Brixton was with me that day. She'd come to bring me some soup. The picture was becoming clearer and more horrifying by the minute. How many of my recent problems could be traced back to Brixton's interference? The fall that had left me with a sprained wrist and bruised ribs might not have been an accident at all. "We're going to need to get you to a hospital for blood tests," Sergeant Williams said. "If she's been drugging you regularly, there might still be traces in your system." "Will that help convict her?" Colin asked, his voice hard in a way I'd never heard before. "Combined with the recordings and the theft charge, it should be enough to put her away for a long time. Elder abuse, fraud, theft, possibly attempted kidnapping if her plan to have Mrs. Whitfield committed had succeeded. She's looking at serious prison time." Tommy tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma, there's one more thing." "What is it, sweetheart?" "Mommy has a folder at home. It's hidden in her closet behind the shoe boxes. It has papers about nursing homes and places for old people who can't take care of themselves anymore. She's been visiting them and taking notes." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Brixton hadn't just been planning to have me declared incompetent. She'd been shopping for the facility where she'd warehouse me once she gained control of my life. She'd probably already chosen the place, maybe even made preliminary arrangements. "She showed me brochures once," Tommy continued. "She said someday Grandma might need to live somewhere with nurses, and we had to be ready to help her when that time came. But the places looked really sad, Grandma. The people in the pictures looked like they didn't want to be there." I pulled Tommy closer, overwhelmed by the scope of Brixton's betrayal. She'd planned every detail of my destruction, from the drugs that would cloud my mind to the institution where she'd abandon me. And she'd prepared her own son for the inevitability of losing his grandmother, conditioning him to accept it as a natural and necessary step. Colin stood abruptly and walked to the window, his shoulders shaking with suppressed emotion. When he turned back to face us, tears were streaming down his face. "I let this happen," he said. "I let her poison you, manipulate me, traumatize my own son. What kind of man does that make me?" "It makes you human," I said gently. "She's had 8 years to perfect her manipulation. She knew exactly how to play on your love for both of us." But Tommy saw through it. A 12-year-old child was braver and smarter than I was. Tommy sees things differently because he hasn't learned to doubt his instincts yet. Adults teach themselves to ignore red flags, to give people the benefit of the doubt even when they shouldn't. Children trust their gut feelings. Sergeant Williams closed his notebook and stood. Mrs. Whitfield, we'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. And Tommy, we'll need your parents' permission to interview you properly, with a child advocate present. I'll bring him, Colin said firmly. And I want to press charges, too, for what she did to my son, for what she put him through. There has to be consequences for making a child live with that kind of fear and responsibility. As the officers prepared to leave, Sergeant Williams paused at the door. Mrs. Whitfield, you should know that your grandson probably saved your life tonight. If Brixton's plan had succeeded, if you'd been arrested and declared incompetent. He didn't need to finish the sentence. We all knew where this had been heading. A slow slide into institutional care, drugged into compliance, isolated from anyone who might advocate for me. I might have spent my remaining years in a sterile facility, confused and forgotten, while Brixton enjoyed the fruits of her cruelty. But Tommy had stopped her. My brave, observant, loyal grandson had seen through 8 years of careful manipulation and found the courage to act when it mattered most. As the police car pulled away, taking with them the evidence that would hopefully ensure Brixton faced justice, I sat in my living room with my son and grandson, all of us trying to process the magnitude of what had almost happened. The woman we'd welcomed into our family, the mother of my precious grandson, had been systematically destroying us from within. And we'd been so busy trying to keep the peace that we'd almost let her succeed. 3 days after Brixton's arrest, she was released on bail. $25,000 that her mother had somehow scraped together, probably by mortgaging her own modest home. The news hit me like a physical blow when Sergeant Williams called to inform me. I'd been hoping for at least a few weeks of peace before having to face the reality of a trial and everything that would come with it. She's not allowed to contact you or come within 500 feet of your home, he assured me. But, Mrs. Whitfield, you need to be careful. People facing serious charges sometimes make desperate choices. I understood what he wasn't saying directly. Brixton had nothing left to lose now. Her marriage was over, her reputation destroyed, her future hanging by a thread. Desperate people were dangerous people. Colin had moved back into my house temporarily with Tommy, unable to bear staying in the home he'd shared with a woman he was realizing he'd never really known. The boy was sleeping better now, finally safe from his mother's manipulation, but Colin was a wreck. He barely ate, spent hours staring out windows, and jumped every time the phone rang. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, he said on Thursday morning, sitting at my kitchen table while I made breakfast. He'd lost weight in just 3 days, his clothes hanging loose on his frame. Remember when she insisted on doing your grocery shopping that time you had the flu? Or when she volunteered to organize your medications? I flipped pancakes with steady hands, but my stomach churned as I thought about those incidents with new clarity. She was looking for opportunities to drug me, I said quietly, testing different methods to see what worked best. And I thanked her for being so helpful. Colin's voice was thick with self-loathing. I actually thanked her for slowly poisoning my own mother. Tommy appeared in the doorway, hair rumpled from sleep, carrying his ever-present sketch pad. Since Monday night, he'd barely let it out of his sight, as if it were a security blanket. "Is Mommy going to come back?" he asked, the question he'd been asking every morning since she'd been taken away in handcuffs. "No, sweetheart," I said firmly. "She's not allowed to come here anymore." "Good," he said simply, climbing onto his usual chair. "I don't want her to hurt you anymore, Grandma." It broke my heart that a 12-year-old child felt relief about his mother being gone, but I couldn't argue with his reasoning. Brixton had hurt all of us, but Tommy had borne the unique burden of seeing her true nature while being powerless to stop her. The phone rang at exactly 9:30, interrupting our quiet breakfast. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my blood run cold. It was Colin's number, the landline at his house. "Don't answer it," Colin said quickly, but I was already reaching for the receiver. "Norma." Brixton's voice was different now, stripped of all pretense of sweetness. It was cold, calculating, and utterly venomous. "I think it's time we had a real conversation." "You're not supposed to contact me," I said, my hand trembling slightly as I gripped the phone. "I'm calling from my own home. Technically, I'm calling Colin. You just happened to answer." I could hear the smirk in her voice. "Besides, what are they going to do? Arrest me again? I'm already facing 10 years in prison thanks to you." Colin was gesturing frantically for me to hang up, but something made me stay on the line. Maybe I needed to hear what she really thought, now that all pretense was gone. "What do you want, Brixton?" "I want you to know that you haven't won anything. You think you're so clever, turning my own son against me, making me look like some kind of monster. But let me tell you what's really going to happen." Her voice was getting louder, more unhinged. In the background, I could hear things being thrown, the sound of breaking glass. "I'm going to take Tommy. My mother has friends in other states, people who won't ask too many questions. By the time Colin figures out what's happened, we'll be long gone. And you pathetic old witch, will spend the rest of your miserable life knowing you destroyed a child's relationship with his mother." Tommy had gone white, understanding enough to realize his mother was threatening to kidnap him. Colin grabbed the phone from my hands. "Brixton, if you touch my son, I will hunt you down myself," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Your son?" She laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. "He was never your son, Colin. He was my insurance policy. My guarantee that no matter what happened, I'd have something valuable to bargain with. And now you've forced me to cash it in." The line went dead. Colin was already dialing 911 while I pulled Tommy close to me, feeling his small body shake with fear. Through the kitchen window, I could see neighbors going about their normal Thursday morning routines, completely unaware that a madwoman was somewhere in the city, planning to destroy what was left of our family. The police arrived within minutes, but it was too late. By the time they reached Colin's house, Brixton was gone. The place was trashed, furniture overturned, family photos smashed on the floor. In Tommy's room, clothes were scattered everywhere as if she'd been packing quickly, deciding what to take and what to leave behind. But Tommy was safe with us, and that's all that mattered. "We need to consider putting you in protective custody," Sergeant Williams said when he arrived at my house an hour later. "All of you. She's clearly unstable, and she's facing serious charges. People in her position sometimes decide they have nothing left to lose." "For how long?" Colin asked. "Until we find her. Could be days, could be weeks." I looked around my kitchen, the heart of my home where I'd cooked thousands of meals and solved countless problems over the years. The idea of leaving it, of hiding from Brixton instead of standing my ground, felt like letting her win. "No," I said firmly. "This is my home. I won't be driven out of it by that woman." "Mrs. Whitfield, I understand how you feel, but do you?" I interrupted, standing up straighter. "Do you understand what it's like to have someone systematically try to destroy your mind, your freedom, your life? To discover that someone you welcomed into your family was planning to drug you into compliance and warehouse you in some institution?" I walked to the window and looked out at the rose garden my husband had planted for me 23 years ago. The late spring blooms were just beginning to open, their colors bright against the green leaves. I've spent the last 8 years making excuses for her behavior, trying to keep the peace, convincing myself that family meant enduring anything for the sake of unity. But family isn't supposed to hurt you. Family isn't supposed to see you as an obstacle to overcome. Tommy slipped his hand into mine. "Grandma's right," he said quietly. "We shouldn't have to hide. Mommy's the one who did bad things." Colin looked at his son with something approaching wonder. "When did you get so wise?" "I had to," Tommy said simply. "Someone had to pay attention. The truth of that statement hung in the air between us. This child had been forced to grow up too fast, to become the guardian of secrets too heavy for someone his age to carry. But he'd done it anyway, out of love and loyalty and a courage that humbled me. "We'll increase patrols in your neighborhood," Sergeant Williams said finally, accepting that we wouldn't be moved. "And we'll expedite the search for your daughter-in-law. But promise me you'll be careful. Don't go anywhere alone. Keep your doors locked. Call us if anything seems suspicious." After the police left, the three of us sat in my living room, trying to process the new reality we were facing. Brixton was out there somewhere, planning who knew what kind of revenge. She'd shown us that she was capable of anything, that the woman we thought we knew had never really existed. "I keep trying to remember if there were signs earlier," Colin said, breaking the heavy silence. "In the beginning, when we first met. But she seemed so normal, so caring. She was working as a nurse then, for God's sake. I thought that meant she was naturally nurturing." "She was good at pretending," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "But sometimes when she thought no one was looking, her face would get mean, really mean. Like when you wouldn't buy her something she wanted, or when Grandma would talk about her own mother. She hated hearing about happy families." I thought about that, about the few times I'd caught glimpses of something cold in Brixton's expression. I'd always dismissed it as stress or fatigue, never imagining it might be her true self bleeding through her carefully constructed mask. "Do you think she ever loved any of us?" Colin asked, his voice small and wounded. It was Tommy who answered, with the brutal honesty that only children possess. "I don't think she knows how." As night fell, we settled into an uneasy routine. Colin and Tommy took the guest room, while I tried to sleep in my own bed. But every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside my window, made me sit up alert and listening. Around midnight, my phone rang. "I'm watching the house," Brixton's voice whispered when I answered. "I can see Tommy's silhouette in the upstairs window. Such a sweet boy. It would be a shame if something happened to him." This time I hung up immediately and called the police. But when they searched the area, they found nothing. No sign of Brixton, no evidence she'd been anywhere near my property. "She could be calling from anywhere," Officer Chen explained. "These days, you can make your number appear to be calling from any location. She might not even be in the state." But I knew better. I could feel her out there, circling like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The woman who'd spent 8 years infiltrating our family, learning our habits and weaknesses, wasn't going to give up easily. As I finally drifted off to sleep near dawn, I couldn't shake the feeling that our real ordeal was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse parking lot watching Brixton being led away in shackles. The judge had sentenced her to 12 years in prison for elder abuse, attempted fraud, theft, and harassment. Her bail had been revoked after she'd violated the restraining order 3 more times, and she'd spent the last 4 months in jail awaiting trial. The woman in the orange jumpsuit bore little resemblance to the polished, manipulative creature who'd sat at my dinner table planning my destruction. Prison had stripped away her designer clothes, her perfect makeup, her carefully styled hair. What remained was harsh and desperate, all sharp edges and barely contained rage. As the transport van pulled away, Tommy slipped his hand into mine. At 13 now, he was taller, more confident, but he still carried his sketch pad everywhere. During the trial, his testimony had been devastating in its quiet honesty. Even the defense attorney had seemed uncomfortable cross-examining a child who spoke with such clear-eyed understanding of his mother's cruelty. "Is it really over now, Grandma?" he asked. "Yes, sweetheart. It's really over." Colin wrapped his arm around both of us. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, and he was slowly rebuilding his life. He'd started therapy to work through the guilt and trauma of being manipulated for so many years. Some days were harder than others, but he was healing. "Mom," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology I'll probably never finish paying." "Colin, we've talked about this. You don't owe me anything." "I do, though," I brought that woman into our family. I chose her over you and Tommy again and again. I almost let her destroy you. I turned to face my son, this good man who'd been twisted into knots by someone who specialized in exploiting trust and love. You loved someone who didn't deserve it. That doesn't make you a bad person, Colin. It makes you human. But Tommy saw through her. A kid saw what I couldn't. Tommy wasn't blinded by love and hope the way you were. Adults want to believe the best about people they care about. Children trust their instincts. We walked slowly toward our car, none of us in a hurry to leave this moment behind. The trial had been brutal, dredging up every painful detail of Brixton's manipulation and abuse, but it had also brought us closer together, forced us to confront truths we'd been avoiding for years. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Tommy said as we settled into our seats. "All those times she told me I was being dramatic when I said something felt wrong. She made me think I was crazy for seeing what I was seeing." "That's called gaslighting," Colin said. "It's a form of psychological abuse. She did it to all of us." "But not anymore," I said firmly. "Never again." The drive home was peaceful, the first truly relaxed car ride we'd shared as a family in years. The weight that had been pressing on all of us since that terrible dinner 6 months ago had finally lifted. Tommy actually laughed at something on the radio, a sound so pure and joyful it brought tears to my eyes. Back at my house, our house now since Colin and Tommy had never moved back to their old place, we found something waiting on the front porch, a large envelope with my name written in elegant script. "What is it?" Colin asked, immediately tense. I opened it carefully and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a letter from Brixton's mother, Sarah, whom I'd met only a few times over the years. "Dear Norma, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from right now, but I needed to write to you before I lose my nerve. I've spent the last 6 months trying to understand how my daughter became the person she is, and I keep coming back to one terrible conclusion. I failed her, and in failing her, I failed your family too. I knew Brixton was struggling with money. She'd been coming to me for help for years, always with stories about how Colin wasn't providing enough, how you were hoarding wealth that should be shared with family. I gave her money, made excuses for her spending, enabled her sense of entitlement. I thought I was being a supportive mother. I had no idea she was drugging you. I had no idea about the depth of her manipulation and cruelty. When the police told me what she'd done, what she'd planned to do, I couldn't sleep for weeks. The woman they described wasn't the daughter I raised, but maybe that's because I'd been making excuses for her bad behavior since she was a child. I want you to know that Tommy is a remarkable boy. During the trial, watching him testify with such courage and clarity, I was reminded that good can come from even the most broken situations. You and Colin raised him to be brave and honest, even when it meant standing up to his own mother. I'm selling my house and donating most of the proceeds to organizations that help elder abuse victims. It won't undo the damage Brixton caused, but maybe it can prevent someone else from going through what you endured. I hope someday you can forgive an old woman who should have seen what her daughter was capable of long before she hurt your family. With deepest regret and respect. Sarah Mitchell. I folded the letter carefully and looked at my son and grandson, both watching me with concerned expressions. "What does it say?" Colin asked. I handed him the letter and watched his face change as he read. When he finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "She's not responsible for what Brixton did," he said finally. "No, but I understand why she feels like she is. When someone you love hurts other people, you can't help wondering if you could have prevented it somehow." Tommy had been listening intently. "Do you think Brixton always knew she was mean? Or do you think she convinced herself she was doing good things?" It was such a perceptive question, the kind that cut straight to the heart of human nature. I thought about it carefully before answering. I think she started by convincing herself that what she wanted was reasonable, that we owed her something because life hadn't given her everything she thought she deserved. But somewhere along the way, she crossed a line from wanting things to being willing to destroy people to get them. And she couldn't come back from that? Some people can. Some people recognize when they've gone too far and find ways to make amends. But Brixton, I think she was too proud and too angry to admit she was wrong, so she kept going deeper into the lie until it became her reality. We spent the evening quietly, ordering pizza and watching old movies on television. Normal, peaceful, boring family activities that felt like luxuries after months of court hearings and police interviews and the constant stress of looking over our shoulders. Around 10 o'clock, Tommy brought out his sketch pad and showed us something new. Instead of the careful documentation of Brixton's cruelties that had filled so many pages, he'd been drawing happy scenes. Our family having breakfast together. Colin teaching him to play chess. Me working in my rose garden while they played catch in the yard. I don't want to remember the bad things anymore, he said. I want to fill up my book with good things instead. That sounds like a wonderful plan, I said, hugging him close. Later, after Tommy had gone to bed, Colin and I sat on the front porch listening to the night sounds of the neighborhood. It was something we'd started doing during the trial, these quiet conversations that helped us process everything we'd been through. Do you think we'll ever feel completely safe again? He asked. I think we'll feel different. More careful, maybe, but also stronger. We survived something that could have destroyed us, and we did it by sticking together. Tommy saved us all, Colin said softly. If he hadn't been brave enough to speak up. But he was. And that's because despite everything Brixton put him through, he never stopped believing that truth mattered more than keeping peace. A year later, I was working in my rose garden when I heard the familiar sound of Tommy's bicycle in the driveway. He was 14 now, growing into his father's height and developing his grandfather's gentle nature. The sketch pad had been replaced by a camera, and he'd discovered a talent for photography that amazed his teachers. How was school? I asked as he joined me among the flowers. Good. I got my photos back from the darkroom. He pulled out a collection of black and white prints, images of ordinary life transformed into art through his patient eye. Mr. Henderson thinks I should enter the state competition. I studied the photographs, seeing our neighborhood, our family, our daily life through Tommy's perspective. There was beauty in every frame. Hope in every composition. This was how he chose to see the world now, not as a dangerous place full of hidden threats, but as a canvas full of light and possibility. These are extraordinary, Tommy. You have real talent. I get it from you, he said, settling beside me on the garden bench. The seeing part, I mean. You taught me to pay attention to what's really happening, not just what people want you to see. Colin appeared from the house, home from work, and looking genuinely happy for the first time in years. He'd been promoted to senior partner at his firm, and he'd started dating a kind woman named Lisa, who understood that he came with a teenage son and a mother-in-law who'd always be part of the package. Perfect timing, I said as he joined us. Tommy just showed me his latest photographs. Colin studied the prints with the careful attention he gave to architectural blueprints. These are incredible, son. You've got an artist's eye. Want to see my favorite one? Tommy asked, pulling out a photo I hadn't noticed before. It was a picture of our kitchen table, taken during one of our Sunday morning breakfasts. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating 3 coffee cups, a plate of my homemade biscuits, and our hands as we reached for jam and butter. It was simple and ordinary and absolutely beautiful. That's us, Tommy said unnecessarily. That's our real family. I looked at this remarkable young man, this child who'd saved us all through courage and honesty, and felt my heart fill with gratitude. Brixton had tried to destroy our family, but instead she'd shown us what we really meant to each other. We'd lost the illusion of easy happiness, but we'd gained something more valuable. The knowledge that we could survive anything as long as we faced it together. And in the end, that truth was worth more than all of Brixton's lies combined. The woman who'd tried to steal my life had lost everything. But we had gained something precious, the unshakable certainty that love, when it's real, is stronger than manipulation, and truth, even when it's painful, is always worth fighting for. As the three of us sat in my garden, surrounded by flowers that had survived every season and grown more beautiful with each passing year, I realized that some victories aren't about defeating your enemies. Sometimes they're simply about refusing to let hatred take root in the soil of your heart. And that, I thought as I watched my son and grandson laugh together in the golden afternoon light, was the greatest triumph of all. Now I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.